I remember how happy I felt last April. I remember how sad I felt last June and July. I remember standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon in complete awe, my breath catching in my throat. I remember Mom yelling at my sister and I for being too close to the edge, even though we weren't that close. I remember crying on stage when my sister and I performed our last duet, and I remember hugging her backstage for a very long time after we performed. I remember feeling her tears dripping on my shoulder. I remember when I only liked even numbers. I remember when I first fell in love. We were hugging and mindlessly swaying back and forth in his living room, and he looked at me and said, "Hey, we're slow dancing." I remember when I fell in love with him again. We were lying in bed with our arms intertwined, in a position that looked like we were about to hop out of bed and start tangoing, and then I lifted my leg up to get out from under the covers because I was hot, and the way I did it was really artsy for some reason, and then he copied me and said, "Look, we're dancing." I remember eating pumpkin and cider donut frozen yogurt mixed together with yogurt chips on top. I remember getting on the completely wrong train to get to the Lorde concert, having to hail a taxi, which turned out to be absurdly hard even though I was in the city, and walking into the venue as Lorde was walking onto the stage. I remember thinking such perfect timing was a once in a lifetime thing. I remember sobbing to my coach on a recruiting weekend, begging him to let me skip the stupid volleyball game and go to a concert I already had tickets for. He said I had to stay for the first half and then I could leave, and I drove an hour, parked, and then walked into the concert right as the band was walking on. I remember realizing that such perfect timing was a twice in a lifetime thing. I remember trying to convince my parents to let me get a kitten from a Petco in Washington, D.C. I remember that I don't even really like cats. I remember eating a bunch of cookies that my aunt sent me in a care package, even though I have a gluten allergy, and feeling sick all night because of it. I remember feeling very sick the day we had our dog put down. I still feel sick when I think about it. I miss her. I remember when I came into my room one night and my roommate and her boyfriend were snoring so loud that I walked right back out and slept on the couch in the living room. I remember the first time I ever saw my roommate and how horrified I was. I remember saying that I was going to start being nicer to her. I think I have been. I remember playing Brick Breaker back when I had a Blackberry. I remember standing in a dance studio with huge windows on 37th Street and feeling so full of life that I thought part of me might start spilling onto the floor. I remember thinking how embarrassing that would be. I remember the first thing I said to Billy. I remember the last thing I said to Billy. I remember that I forgot about his birthday until it was already a month past. I remember being happy that I forgot. I remember being happy on my 16th birthday. I remember being miserable on my 15th birthday. And I remember feeling sad on my 20th birthday. I remember getting a speeding ticket on an empty highway and being amazed that the one time it could have been useful to cry, I didn't cry. I remember crying as soon as the police officer drove away. I remember when my dad was driving around the block while I picked up the pizza at the pizza place, and when I came out, I saw his car driving away to make another round. So I ran after it, but it wasn't his car, and I was chasing a stranger. I remember waking up from ankle surgery and Mom giving me a stuffed bear. I named it Jacob, and it still sits at the foot of my bed. I remember eating so much last Thanksgiving that I genuinely thought my stomach might explode. I had to go for a walk immediately after because I felt so full that I couldn't even sit down. I remember how fulfilled, or maybe even overfilled, I felt after seeing my first concert. I didn't know what to do with myself. It felt like nothing else mattered for a little while. I remember realizing that nothing matters. I remember wishing that things did matter and trying to convince myself that the concept of mattering makes sense in this world. I remember thinking that nobody could possibly understand what goes through my head. I still think this every day. I remember wishing I was normal. I remember thinking that if I were normal, I'd be less lonely. I remember that normal's boring. I remember coming back from saving $100 Black Friday shopping at Urban Outfitters and seeing a $100 bright pink parking ticket on my windshield. I remember when Billy would wrap his arm around me while we were walking and how it would make me jump because it felt so good that it was painful. I don't think I've ever felt anything else quite like that before. I remember that my mom made me wait until I was 18 to get my driver's license, even though all my friends got theirs at 16. I remember her making me wait until 2 weeks after my birthday to go and take the driver's test because I walked on my sprained ankle, even though I was supposed to be using crutches. I remember failing my permit test twice and having to go back the next day because you can only try twice in one day. I remember thinking that I remember a lot of things involving cars, but I'm not really even a car person. I remember when my sister bought a Hula Girl bobblehead for her car to match the one in mine. I remember how excited I was the first time I saw snow and how annoyed everyone else around me was because it was snowing. I remember the moment when I first became truly aware of death. I was in a yoga class and I was 19 years old and I thought I might throw up or faint, but instead I just kept holding Peaceful Warrior. I remember thinking that I shouldn't end this on such a sad note. I remember thinking that I will anyway, since I've already remembered more things than I planned on.